I have been putting this particular video off for like over a year. I've been kind of slowly working my way through some of the other videos like top 10 horror books and top 10 series I read and top 10 manga and all of that stuff. Only because science fiction is arguably my favorite genre of all time, and I definitely have read by far the most of it. That's not to say that I'm some type of expert in science fiction or I have more read than somebody else. It just is my most read and maybe my favorite genre, which just makes it harder than the other ones to put this list together. But here we are. The day has come. But let's not waste any time here. Let's get right into it. The top 10 science fiction books of all time that I have read. And first I want to start this off with an honorable mention, and that would be Hyperion. And I do want to give this an honorable mention because I do believe that the book Hyperion deserves to be in the conversation of greatest science fiction book ever written, even though I believe that The Fall of Hyperion is a very clear step down in quality from this book. And then I would argue that the Endymion books shit the bed so hard that it almost taints the legacy of the original Hyperion book, which isn't fair because this book is genuinely good enough to be considered in the conversation of the greatest book, science fiction book of all time. Now, starting the actual list at number 10, Cloud Atlas. And this one almost didn't even make it onto the list. I really kind of kicked around the idea of bringing something else onto the list, something maybe more readable like House of Suns, or a little bit more classic like Childhood's End. I even kicked around the idea of bringing To Your Scattered Bodies Go by Philip Jose Farmer on here. But at the end of the day, I really did pick Cloud Atlas just because as a book, it feels a little bit more profound than the other ones does. So Cloud Atlas is a book of multiple stories, and they're kind of built inside of each other, kind of like a nesting doll. The first story starts in the past with these guys traveling on a ship. Then it moves forward in time, tells the next story, which is this man writing a symphony. Then it moves forward into more modern times. Then it eventually moves forward into the future and then into the far future. And the first half of the book is the first half of all of these stories. Then the second half of the book is the second half of all of the stories. And for the first half, you work your way forward to the far future. And then for the second half of the book, you work your way backwards back out to the old-timey ship story. It's a very interesting concept. It's a very interesting read. The only reason I almost didn't want to put it on this list is because the first half of the book is so much more engaging than the second half of the book. Working your way in is way more interesting than working your way back out. But at the end of the day, it's just such a good book, and it's just executed so well. I just kind of had to put it on the list. It felt wrong every time I pulled it off the list to try and slot something else in its place. Book number 9, Dr. Blood Money by Philip K. Dick. Now, this was another one that I kind of hemmed and hawed about because you could put so many other Philip K. Dick books in this position, like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep or Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, which actually were the two that I struggled when I was putting this on here. I went with Dr. Blood Money because I would argue that they are all three of pretty much equal quality. There is no dips in any of them as far as this position is concerned, the number 9 position. But this one I put on here just because, it is so criminally underrated. This book is so fabulously good, and it is, like I said, just as good toe-to-toe as those other two, and maybe more entertaining. Maybe not Three Stigmata. God, that's so wildly entertaining. It's hard to fathom. Anyway, Dr. Blood Money. What is Dr. Blood Money? Dr. Blood Money is the story of the end of the world. It is the bombs go off, a nuclear explosion, the whole world is destroyed, and it's basically about if we had a nuclear apocalypse, how would the world move on from there? You get about 1 or 2 chapters of normal everyday life before the, bombs go off, and the rest of the book is just how the world copes and exists afterwards. Then there was a astronaut right in the middle of his ship taking off when the bombs go off, so it kind of shuts down all of his systems, and he gets stuck in the capsule, and it's just orbiting around the planet, and he's stuck there in this capsule, and it's like, how does he cope? cope with being isolated like that. So he kind of starts this little radio station and broadcasts down to the planet just to keep him sane and kind of help keep them sane at the same time. It's just a wonderful story. It's fabulously entertaining. And there are some chapters which have some of the, I would say, arguably the best prose that Philip K. Dick has put into one of his books, which isn't saying much. He wasn't a very prose-heavy guy. But boy, oh boy, is this absolutely amazing. And if you have not read it, if you've been sleeping on Dr. Blood Money and you're a Philip K. Dick fan, go get it. Try it out because it's criminally underrated. Number 8, The Flowers for Algernon. This is one that I actually just recently read this year, and it absolutely immediately rose to the ranks of just some of the best books that I've ever read, not even just sci-fi. It is so amazing. This is the story of an organization of people. They're starting to run some experiments. They have discovered a procedure that could increase somebody's intelligence. So they take and they do this experiment on mice, and then once they feel like it's working on the mice, then they find this mentally handicapped man and they take him into the program and they do this procedure on him in an attempt to increase and elevate his intelligence. Then we follow him through the rest of the story as we follow him and the results of this procedure, how it affects him, how it affects his intelligence, how it affects his relationships with the people that he knew before the experiment, to the people he knew after the experiment, and the consequences that come from doing something like this to a human being. And this is a very hard read. It is not a light, fun read. It is very difficult to get through almost all of the way through. It's not even like there's a light chapter here and there. You're in for it as you go through it. I even did a video on this where I discussed this because this lost the Hugo Award to The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and I believe that was an absolute mistake. There is no way that The Moon is a Harsh Mistress is a better book than this, but either way, that's irrelevant. This Flowers for Algernon, number 8. Number 7, Clara and the Sun. I have brought this book up. I don't even know how many times this book's come up on my channel at this point in time. I love this book so much, it's kind of crazy. Kazuo Ishiguro is a Nobel Prize winning author. There is a reason he is a Nobel Prize winning author, and this is just a fabulous book. It's so good. Clara and the Sun is a book about a little robot girl. She's called an artificial friend, sold in stores, and they are sold to be companions to little kids. And you are locked in the head of Clara. And the book starts basically with her being in a storefront and you watching people walk by the roads as she watches them look in the windows at her. Then she gets moved around the store, and then she eventually gets sold to a family where she's, the friend of a little girl. And the viewpoint of this book is so fascinating because you are the doll and you're learning about this world in bits and pieces, because you'll be sitting in a corner because you're a toy and people will be walking in and out of the room having conversations. You'll get pieces of this conversation, but then you'll miss the rest of it when they leave and continue the conversation out in the hallway. And it is somehow so touching, and the book is ultimately so much about the human condition. It's kind of crazy, because you're not even a human, you are this little doll. But then it's also written by Kazuo Ishiguro, who has this way of writing, and he has this ability to just take his finger and kind of touch your soul as he's writing. I don't know how to put it into words. I mean, you can go back to Never Let Me Go by Kazuo, or even The Buried Giant. Just read anything by him, and there's a reason this guy won the Nobel Prize. That's what I'm saying, I guess. But this is probably my favorite book that I've read of his, and I've read a few. Yeah, I don't know. If you haven't read Clara and the Sun, go read it. I can't recommend any of these books enough. Also, there's some extremely potent conversations about classism and elitism going on in this book as well. Number 6, 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. This is my favorite Haruki Murakami book of all time, period. And that's saying something, because Haruki is just a vastly impressive author. He's probably in my top, I don't know what, he's easily in my top 5 authors of all time. I don't know where he would fall on that list, but he's in there, that is for sure. And this is like, what if you were taking a cab ride and your cab got stuck in a traffic jam and you got stuck at a standstill on a bridge? And to get out of that traffic jam, you got out of the car and climbed down off that bridge. But when you did that, you climbed into a parallel universe with 2 moons and little people, and it's all kinds of weird. Haruki Murakami that is literally the opening chapter of this book. And Haruki Murakami is just, he works in magic and magical realism and surrealism, and his books tend to be just weird puzzles that you go through. You will get questions after questions that don't necessarily come with answers later in the book. This isn't necessarily one of his more complicated books. That would be more like Kafka on the Shore, but this is still right in line with Haruki Murakami. But this one just was so magical, at least for me. I loved every second of it. I loved the characters. You are following 2 main characters, and they alternate chapters, a man and a woman. They have absolutely nothing to do with each other for like 90% of the book, and you're just following their parallel stories. They will eventually start to affect each other, and they will eventually line up in the end. But for most of the story, it's really just following these 2 characters through this amazingly wonderful and magical world. All right, we are out of the back half of the list, and we are into the top 5, starting with number 5, 1984. And this one is, I struggled with this one. I almost didn't put this one on the list as well, because this, I wanted so many books to be on this list so badly. I almost didn't put this one on just because I was just going to put it on a different list and be like, well, I guess I could just make a top 10 dystopian books list. That way I could have an extra spot to put one of those other books that I wanted so badly to be on this list. But then at the end of the day, I just could not bring myself to have a top 10 science fiction books of all time and not have 1984 on that list. If you don't know what 1984 is, what rock have you been living under is the question that I have for you. It is, one of the biggest memes of all time. We are living in the world of 1984. Anyway, it's a future of a dystopian future where Big Brother, big government has taken over. They rule everybody's lives. They rule everything. They rule the information that you receive. They change the facts. They change the news. They change history itself and feed it to the people. And then they live in this lie. They live under the thumb of Big Brother. And then there are maybe some people who are going to question that, push back against it, and maybe try to rebel. And we'll just see how well that goes for them. It is one of the most meaningful and poignant and prophetic books. It had so much reach, so much impact. It's hard to overstate just how important this book has been to literature and fiction and just the world at large. Number 4, Neuromancer. Me and this book have a real love-hate relationship. I had to put it on the list, and I had to put it high on the list because it is that good of a book. It is that influential. It's that phenomenal. Neuromancer is the origin of cyberpunk. It invented the entire genre. It invented everything that the genre is. Even Gibson himself will tell you that he really didn't invent anything. He kind of took a bunch of things that existed at the time and smashed them together into what this is, but then this became cyberpunk, and everything that has come after it has really been, The Matrix is essentially almost a huge ripoff of this, and like Ghost in the Shell. It's the idea of this virtual reality world, the Matrix, and that you jack into the Matrix. The book will ultimately tackle the ideas of alternate realities and AI, and I don't even know. It's so hard to put into words. Anyway, now why I say me and this book have a love-hate relationship is because this book was so profoundly good and invented an entire genre. It's phenomenal. But my problem is that it is written so, I want to say badly, but that is not the case. It's just so The writing is, some people will say dense. I will say inaccessible. The writing to this is just so inaccessible. It is hard to read. The prose is weird. The style is weird. Everything about it is just so jarring. If it weren't for the way that the book is written, it probably would have made it higher on the list. But either way, it doesn't matter. I don't care how weird that writing style is or how tricky it can be at times. Number 4 on the list, phenomenal. Number 3, The Book of the New Sun. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to include the entire series of The Book of the New Sun, because it was written as a single book and it was intended to be released as a single book, but the publishers decided, no. We want to break this up into multiple books and sell it over a period of years, whatever. But The Book of the New Sun is a far future dying Earth series by Gene Wolfe, and it is written by a torturer at the end of his life, and he's talking about the beginning of his life, but he's also has a perfect memory, but he's also possibly insane, but he's about the most unreliable narrator you've ever seen in your entire life. Like I said, it's a dying Earth book, so it's far flung in the future, but at the same time, it's written in the style of a fantasy book. So we're using fantasy words and ways of describing things. It's kind of swords and sorcery. And then you'll go through like 2 chapters and he's describing the tower that he lives in. And it takes you about 2 chapters to realize we're in a broken down spaceship, because he's not describing it in a way that makes it immediately apparent what he's describing, because the people don't have words for this technology that they live inside of, because they don't know that it's even technology, because those days are so far in the past, they don't know. It is phenomenally dense. It is phenomenally confusing. The words that he has chosen to use, he pulled obscure words from languages and dictionaries that haven't been used in thousands of years, and then just slides them into the sentence like you're gonna know what the hell's happening. And then he'll even use alternate kind of meanings for words, just to make it almost as difficult as humanly possible to read. But it just makes it that much more engaging to read, in my opinion. At least it did for me. It might not for you. Your mileage may vary when it comes to The Book of the New Sun. It is not for everybody. I guess you could say that also about Neuromancer. It's not for everybody either. Actually, I guess you could say that about 1Q84, Cloud Atlas. There's a lot of books that I read that I guess you could say is not for everybody. But anyway, absolutely, The Book of the New Sun, number 3. All right, I'm going to buck the system here. Everybody puts the same book on their top 10 list, and so actually most lists it ends up as number 1, and that book is Dune. And Dune is my second favorite book series of all time. So I had to pick my favorite Dune book to be on this list, and it is not Dune. It is Dune Messiah. And I believe that I don't know if I would say it's the best, and I don't know if I would say that it's even my favorite. Actually, I did say that this was my favorite as soon as I read it, and for about the first year and a half after I read it, if you would have asked, I would have not even batted an eye. Dune Messiah is my favorite Dune book of all time. Having sat with it over time and a little bit longer, I now might say it's tied with the first Dune to be my favorite. But I went ahead and I put it onto this list because as much as I loved the first Dune book, and it is just that 10 out of 10 read that everybody says it is, this is the one that really lit my brain up. And I said, oh my God, this series is something even more special than I thought it was. You get all of the meaning from the first book, all of the tones and undertones of the Messiah and the Dune story, which of course is the young boy Atreides going to the planet Arrakis and them having to fight the Harkonnens and the whole Messiah mission that he goes on to become the leader of the planet. But then it also has those heavy undertones of charismatic leaders should come with a warning label, which is exactly what Herbert said about the story that he was writing. And you get all of that, but it's really in this one where he flips a switch and he shows you just what this series really is. where it really is going and what this actually means for the universe at large. And then you get some of the most just profound scenes that I still think about as some of my favorite scenes from the entire 6-book run in this book. It really, really is something special. The people that talk down to Dune Messiah and it's just a epilogue to the other book, and it's not, it hurts my soul to hear some of the things that people say about Dune Messiah when they're just talking down to it. It really is special to me. I loved it. It really did mean a lot. I don't know. This was what made, anyway, I'm going to stop now. All right. Number one, the number one science fiction book of all time that I have read, Ubik. And this was a hard one. This was exceptionally hard. I went round and round and round on this one because I don't know. I felt like I don't know why this felt weird to put it in the number one spot. I felt like maybe people are going to think I'm insane. People are going to look at this list and think I'm the craziest person on the face of the planet to put Ubik above Dune and the Book of the New Sun. And somebody might argue that those are technically objectively better books, but at the end of the day, this is my favorite. And that's what it came down to. What is my favorite science fiction book of all time? It is this. It is my favorite Philip K. Dick book of all time, and it is easily probably my favorite science. I enjoy this so much. Oh my God, the complexity, the humor, the ridiculousness of it. Ubik is the story of a world where commercialism has gone so far out of control that you have to put a coin into your front door or it will not open. If you do not have the coin to open your front door, it will literally argue with you. And if you try to tamper with it, it will call the police on you. It is insane. There are groups of psychic terrorists in the world, and our main characters work for a counter-terrorist unit of counter-psychic terrorists. They ultimately go on a mission to the moon where something very bad happens and time breaks. When time breaks, time starts to actually flow in the wrong direction while the time for the characters is still moving forward. Actual time is moving backwards. Then periodically people will get dislodged from time entirely, in which case they shoot forward in time at such a rapid rate that they will literally decompose before your eyes. Oh, and that's not even to mention the fact that if you die and rush your body into a hyperbaric chamber of sorts, you could put yourself into a near death state. Even though your body is dead, you can preserve your consciousness, and then you can go and talk to the dead body and talk to their consciousness, and they are being placed in a form of half-life, so to speak. The amount of concepts that's happening inside of this book is insane. By the time the book ends, you're back in like the 1930s, and it started, oh my God, it's so good. It is just wildly imaginative, wildly entertaining. It made, I want to say, the top 100 greatest books of the 20th century for the Time magazine. It deserves every bit of being on that list. It is, I cannot say enough about Ubik. If you have not read it, stop everything you're doing and go get it. There's a reason why Miura named one of the God Hand after the book. I mean, it's just so good. It is my favorite science fiction book of all time. It is amazing. Anyway, guys, if you made it this far into the video, I do want to say thank you so very much. I appreciate every single one of you. And as always, the link for my Patreon's in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.